I am a adult that was diagnosed with ADHD as a child, and at the time, I was diagnosed with something called hyperkinesis with attention deficit, and so lo and behold, I grow into an adult, and I choose a career in adventure, and then I have two children who both have ADHD. So I want to talk a little bit about what that path has looked like and what I've learned along the way, both as a person serving this community, uh, living with ADHD myself, and then raising two children who have ADHD. I'm going to talk about eight particular strategies. I'm going to introduce you to a beautiful concept I learned in college called the looking glass self, and how I choose to focus on strengths versus challenges, and try and draw out opportunities for my kids based on what they do well. And as part of that, I keep lots of victory lists, and I again look for opportunities to focus on their accomplishments. I'm going to talk a little bit about how to involve your children in decision making and the impact that has played in my kids' life. The concept that we have embraced as a family, learning how to fail forward. I'm going to talk about some effective communication strategies. I'm going to talk about the importance of validation, surviving the chaos, and then maybe perhaps the most important piece is how not to forget about me and what I'm dealing with, and how I restore vigor to my spirit. So the looking glass self is essentially this concept that I think I am who I think you think I am. So what I believe you believe about me is I internalize and believe that about myself. You'll see the slide on the left is a cat staring into a mirror and looking back is a very pitiful, pathetic kitten. But on the right hand side, there's a cat looking, and there's looking back at him is is this magnificent lion. The mirror represents how you believe other people see you. And so I wanted to point out that these spots here on the left represent uh, words that have been used to describe me and other people who are like me. Am I distractible, oversensitive? Do I perseverate? Can I be disorganized? Am I daydreaming? Am I a procrastinator? Am I rigid? Am I stubborn? Can I be manipulative? What if I were to tell you that each one of those challenge areas has embedded in it, hidden deep inside, this wonderful corresponding strength? So here we go. Instead of being distractible, I'm multitaskable. Instead of being oversensitive, I have this beautiful intuitive nature. Instead of being, someone who perseverates on something, I can get ultra focused. In fact, that is one of my great strengths. Many folks believe those of us with ADHD are just distracted. Well, the truth is that we sometimes become very laser focused on something. Am I disorganized? Yeah, but with that comes the flexibility that I can find solutions when other folks get stuck. Am I a daydreamer? I am sometimes, but I also have a really creative spirit, and so does one of my children. I mean, she's a self-taught artist, and every day she does something that blows me away. In fact, recently I noticed all around the house all the switch plates were gone, and I'm like, why are the switch plates all exposed? Well, it turns out that she was making a creative, artistic switch plate for every single switch plate in the house, and I wouldn't trade those for all the world. When we move from this house someday, those switch plates are coming with us. Those to the on and off switches. Do I procrastinate? I do. I do. But what if I were to tell you that it is actually one of my great strengths, and the way that I've turned it into a strength is I recognize that I'm urgency driven, and so recognizing that in my kid, I help create deadlines for them that help break down projects that they will procrastinate about and create little deadlines that have teeth that allow them to be successful. Am I rigid? Sometimes, but with that comes structure. Am I stubborn? Yes, I am. But perhaps one of my great strengths and my kids' great strengths is that through that stubbornness I've developed grit and a tenacity that sometimes I don't see in others who haven't had the kind of challenges I've had growing up. Am I manipulative? I am. But let me ask you something. How would you define manipulation? All right. So if you've done so for yourself, manipulation is the art of, getting someone to do something the way you want it done or to see things the way you want it seen. Well, isn't that really the seeds of leadership? So essentially, one of the things that I have nurtured in my children is rather than seeing themselves as distractible, oversensitive, perseverating, disorganized, daydreaming, procrastinating, rigid, stubborn little manipulators, I am raising multitasking, intuitive, ultra focused, flexible, creative, deadline dependent, structured, tenacious leaders. So, because that is how I choose to see my children, and I keep drawing out those wonderful strengths that they have, it is my belief that they more often see the magnificent lion staring back at them than the meager kitten. And so much of who they are is actualized by how I have chosen to view them and how I encourage them to view themselves. So as part of this unique process, I also really want to focus on strengths and abilities and successes. And so, rather than focus on things that aren't working well, or take the medical approach, which is something is broken, so let's fix it. I keep a ton of victory lists. Our if you could look at our refrigerator right now, it is covered in accomplishments, awards. And we've got trophies that our kids have legitimately earned through dance and cross country competitions. We have artwork that has been done by the kids. We have ribbons that have been earned at national competitions, and they're everywhere in this house. You cannot go into a single room without the kids seeing the extraordinary things that they've come, and we keep victory lists as a part of what we do. You know, so my challenge list I keep small. The things that I choose to focus on that we're trying to change, I keep it to one, two, or three. The victory lists are numerous. How big are the victory lists? They're a lot bigger. They're a lot bigger than my challenge list. From as early as we could possibly do it, we had our kids involved in the decision making and problem solving process. I would involve them in helping set guidelines, limits, and I would even have them help set consequences. Now, I always maintained veto power over those kinds of things, but I helped set those guidelines, and part of that was to give them choices. If they struggled to come up with a limit that I was trying to set for them, I would invite them to choose from one, two, or three options. Um, and then, maybe one of the things, and my kids, by the way, they get along really well. And I'm really, really happy about that. I've got a 16-year-old boy, a rising or a junior, and I've got a daughter who is 14, and she's a freshman this year in high school. And to be honest, they really like each other. And part of why that is from a very early age, we we said to the older boy that he had a responsibility and he was somewhat of a caretaker for his sister. And all along, when I would take them to school in the morning, we'd play the "My Favorite Thing About You" game every morning that we drove to school. And now, as they become older adults, we play it less frequently, but we certainly play it when people are fussy and getting aggravated, or feeling kind of salty towards one another. And essentially, it goes like this. I'll say, "Hey, we're gonna play the My Favorite Thing About You" game, and then my son will say, "I'll go first," and my daughter will roll her eyes and say, "I hate this game," but she gets into it just as much as he does, and everybody gets to say a favorite thing about another person. We do it probably once or twice a week now that they're older, but it's become a real staple of the Willson family and how we've chosen to interact with each other and focus on each other's abilities and the things that we enjoy. One of the other things that I do fairly frequently with the kids is, when they come home at night, and we've been doing this since they were little, is we'll call it different things, but essentially we'll let everyone kind of talk about what was their rose for the day, what was their thorn, um, you know, and so it could be what was the best thing, what was the worst thing. But it certainly gives us an opportunity to engage with our kids and talk about the trials and tribulations and the victories that they're having a chance to accomplish on a daily basis. And it's helpful for both my wife and I to have a chance to express to our kids, that we have some of those same, areas of challenge, and that we have things that we overcome, and that there are amazing things that happen to us on a daily basis that we're really happy about. I mentioned on the onset that, as a family, we've chosen to have a failing forward with confidence kind of a mindset. You know, sometimes we get caught up in the fact that, it always seems like we're taking 3 or 4 steps back. But if I really were to take an honest look at the growth progression of my kids, and myself, that, there have been setbacks, but there's been steady progress forward, and even during the setbacks, I'm still further along than I was a month, 6 months, or even a year ago. Part of what has allowed us to do that is that while I maintain high expectations for my kids, I expect and I allow for performance and consistency. I know that my kids aren't going to always be firing on all cylinders. I know that, but and so I'm going to celebrate the opportunities where they were successful and they were firing on all cylinders. But I'm certainly not going to beat them up when they don't meet those standards, or they have a fallback in performance, because I want to accept where they are and find solutions to help move them forward. I'm never going to say, well, I know you can do it because you did. I recognize that there's going to be a difference between what they can accomplish on a day-to-day basis. This next piece as well, I'm a absolute believer that that it is so important to reinforce effort, even more so than result. And why? Because I sometimes can't control the result, but I can have control over the amount of effort I give. And if I keep talking about how helpful and how hard you worked at something versus the grade that you got, or the accomplishment that was made, then I focus on what you had true and actual control of. And so when I celebrate that, I believe that it encourages effort, which is what I really need from my kids. The results will come at some level to some degree, but what I really need and want is the effort to try and achieve those results. Um, my my son knows that I sometimes say this, but when he was younger, he was sort of that weird kid who blurted stuff out, who would act the fool, who would get into people's space. And it wasn't until he turned this year 16 where he started to care what he looked like. He started to care what other people thought about him. But we tried to create for him a vision of adulthood, that was going to be different. A vision of what high school looked like, a vision of what college is going to look like versus high school, because there were times where it was really tough for him. And I'll tell you a story about one of those in just a moment. Um, both of our kids are interested in a variety of things, and we certainly have encouraged career exploration, or job shadowing, or getting a chance to be mentored in something that they appreciate or enjoy. My son just finished his first job. He was working at Bojangles, and it gave us an opportunity to role play. How to do an interview, and so when he went into his interview, he had worked out how to answer every question they asked him with one of his top three strengths, and but when he left, he had the job. I also think it's really important to never allow you or your child to use ADHD as a crutch or an excuse. Yes, there are significant challenges that we have in impulse control and stimulation, and a variety of different issue challenges that are real, and that come with with having ADHD. But um, but but greatness is is there for the grasping. Greatness is there for me to achieve if I'm willing to put in the effort, and I'm willing to focus on my strengths and my abilities, and try and take on the world based on what I can do versus what I can't do. And this last one is that story that I told you I was going to tell you about grit. Uh, it was about 4 years ago, and my wife called me at work, and she said, "Can you get home? Jay said on the phone he wants to die." And that's a pretty serious thing, and he was a happy-go-lucky kid, but I was really very concerned. And so I raced home. I got home, and Jay and I had a short conversation. what it turns out was that it was a particularly difficult day for him, and what he was really saying was he didn't want to die. It was just a day that he wished he hadn't been born. And which is a very different kind of message. So what I did with him is, I'm an adventure specialist, and one of the things I teach is primitive skills. And he'd been somewhat interested in that, and so I gave him a flint and steel striker, and I gave him a little tinder bundle, and I taught him how to start a fire with a tinder bundle, and then I gave him the flint and steel, and said, "Now it's your turn." And he scraped that little fire tinder as many times, and he couldn't get it to light. And I said to him, and I knew it was going to be difficult, and I knew that I wasn't going to rescue him. And I said, "Well, listen, buddy, you can come back in the house when it's done." And we hung out there for probably an hour and a half while he got more and more and more frustrated. But that was the key to nurturing grit, is that I created for him a situation where he had to overcome his frustration, and he couldn't just quit. And eventually, one of those sparks caught the tinder bundle on fire, and he jumped up like Tom Hanks from Castaway, and he's like, "Look what I have made! I have made fire!" And I asked him how that felt, and he's looking at this little fire he made, and he said, "It feels like Christmas morning." And I said, "Do you know why it feels that way?" He said, "No, no, Dad." I said, "Because you had to work so hard to get it. You had to earn it. It wasn't something that was just handed or given to you. And you thought all through this process that you weren't going to be able to get it done, and you were frustrated, and you were angry, and you just were really down about it. And then all of a sudden, you kept trying, you kept persevering, and you had the success. And this is what that success feels like." And I said, "You know what that's called, son?" He said, "No, Dad." I said, "It's called grit." And from that day on, and even recently, when he was running cross country, and he was struggling, I could call out to him, "Where's your grit?" And you could see this change of resolve come over his face, and recognize that he had it deep within himself to overcome things that were really hard. It was a really magical moment in our life. I'm also a huge believer in making sure that I have effective communication. I talked about role playing his job interviews, but role playing important conversation in advance. In our household, we've created guidelines about how we have difficult discussions, whether it's where we're going to go on vacation, or a big decision about whether or not we're going to get another dog, or something as benign as what the plan to clean the house is going to be for the weekend. And rather than talk over each other, we have a system that we use where we take turns talking. Um, both my kids have a verbal and a nonverbal cue that means cease and desist. And so understanding that I can communicate that way is important, and that they can communicate that way with me. Their verbal cue to me when I'm being too much, when I'm being too silly, or I'm just aggravating them too much, they say to me, "Goofy," and goofy means, "Dad, stop it. If it was fun, it's not fun anymore." And I still get goofied about once a week from both of my kids. Um, Sometimes on occasion I'll communicate. I'll have a difficult conversation with my kids through email or text, and with texting, because with texting, I don't have to put up with their sighs and eye rolls and their snark, and they don't have to put up with my frustration or my reaction to what they're saying. And I found that it can soften a difficult conversation. Um, again, we have family meetings, and I go into family meetings not with an iron fist, but willing to kind of negotiate, and it's been really good. And then one of the things that I do is I avoid guerrilla arguing. My kids will want to suck me down the path of, why I'm the guy, I'm the bad guy, and rather than that, I just kind of keep going back to the issue at hand, and keeping things focused on what we're trying to accomplish. And that's really tough, because as an impulsive adult, I sometimes want to get led down the road that they take me. But there's a wonderful quote I heard years ago that I've embodied as part of my life, and that is this: I do not have to attend every argument that I'm invited to. I am incredibly a huge believer in validation. And let me ask you something: how do you prefer to receive feedback? You know, I know that I appreciate being validated, and having somebody who's coming at this from where I really believe they understand where I'm coming from. And if I believe that, then I'm kind of open to what they have to say. If I just feel like I'm being talked at or talked to, it just doesn't go well. And I really try and come at conversations with my kids from a place of understanding and mutual respect. Um, because I work with kids, I often will ask kids, "Hey, if you could give me one piece of advice as a from a child to a parent, what would it be?" And last year, I had a kid tell me something that absolutely shook me to my core. And she said, "When you come home and you walk in the door, what's the first thing you do? Do you celebrate being with your kids, or do you start pointing out everything that's wrong?" She knew that the minute I walk in, I see that the trash hasn't been emptied, the dishwasher's not taken care of, the kitchen's a mess, my son's playing on the computer, and I would go straight into, you know, Wreck It Ralph mode. And what she said was, because if that's what you do, then the moment they hear you come in the house, instead of "Daddy's home," instead it's kind of cringing, "Oh no, Dad's home." And I don't want my kids to feel like, "Oh no, Dad's home." And so from that point on, I have tried very hard to honor what I believe are the most important 15 minutes of the day. And those minutes are the first 5 minutes that I get a chance to spend with them in the morning, the first 5 minutes when I get home, and the last 5 minutes I get to spend with them at night. And those minutes are sacrosanct. They're precious, and I treasure them, and I'm very careful about them. Now, how do we survive the chaos at home? Figure out what works and then expand those ideas. Chunk up the projects and break them up into small chunks. I both of my kids, they won't do it yet on their own, but my daughter loves to make lists. So when I say, "Hey Landry, would you make a list?" Oh, she just absolutely adores getting the list out and making the list. And it can be just incredibly satisfying to cross off things that have been on a list. Now, if I were asking all of you, how many of you have made a list and you've added things to that list that you've already done so that you could cross it off? I know I have. And then I think it's important not to impose organizational systems that you believe are going to work, but let them figure out, what systems are going to work for them, and then hold them accountable to those systems. So here's some organizational strategies. One spot by the door for essentials. Once or twice a year we will clear out the room. Everything goes to four tarps: the giveaway tarp, the throwaway tarp, the I don't know tarp, and the keep tarp. And then all the keep stuff goes back into the room. And then we take the I don't know stuff and we decide where it goes. And because when my kids have less stuff to deal with, they can accomplish more. When they get absolutely cluttered with too much stuff, then their productivity drops dramatically. Declutter. Choose one spot to fix. Don't try and take on the whole room. Let's just take this section, and then rather than say go clean your room, we posted a picture of what his clean room looked like, and I'd say go make your room look like the picture. Here's an example in the next slide. All right, and so that's what I'm expecting. All right, getting out the door can be really chaotic in the morning. And so if that is one of the core issues you have, and again, most of your kids for their young adult life, this is going to be something that you're dealing with. Inventory where things go wrong. Do as much preparation the night before. Choose the clothes. Get the bags packed. Have the lunch set up and ready so that in the morning you've got the least amount to do. Everything has a place. Book bag by the door. Sometimes kids can do the meds at school. Have a routine and a structure that you tweak, but it's the same each time. I have found that honey, not vinegar. When I start yelling at the kids that they're going to be late, that's not nearly as effective as if saying, "Hey, let's get in the car so we can listen to some jams," or just focusing on the positive and being sweet and kind to them in the morning. Because when I start barking at them, I set their day off in a really negative way. Have a backup plan when things go south. When things are going to go awry, and it's going to be difficult. And then always remember that as hard as today was, tomorrow's a new day to start all over again and do better. What restores me? How do I keep going? What are the things that I do for me? Because sometimes my wife and I get lost in the whole mix of trying to manage these kids who are hounds of chaos. What sharpens my saw? For me, I'm a whitewater canoeist and woodworking. My wife is a reader. We enjoy going to the movies. We enjoy some on occasion, having a chance to have a quiet evening out and have a nice meal. Um, as a family, it restores our spirit to go camping or travel and go someplace extraordinary. This last spring break, I took my kids to Zion and we climbed to the top of Angel's Landing. And for as long as we live, my kids will remember what it felt like to be on top of the world. Um, and so finding little ways to absolutely restore the vigor to my human spirit to help keep me going. The Scud hour is a way. There's an hour when everybody in the house has to do something that's not fun. I'm paying bills. My wife is grading assignments, and the kids are doing homework. And that way, no one's doing something really fun that anyone else in the family has to be jealous about. I've also found it really important that from a standpoint, I need to be physically active. When I get sedentary, and when I decide that the best thing for me is just to sit on the couch and watch TV, or do nothing, that is in fact not the best thing for me, and that when I invest in myself from a mind body perspective, I tend to be refreshed and whole. And then who are my support networks? Clearly, my wife. I've got some mentors in my life that have meant a great deal to me. I've got some good friends that we get together once a week and we watch, survival shows. And so, knowing that I can't get lost in the mix, and sometimes parents do that, they lose themselves in the mix, is a critical aspect to my being successful in raising a child who also has ADHD. So those are some of my secrets. I hope that you got something from it. We've got a very loving family. We care about each other a great deal. We have a motto, and that is that Willson stick together. And if you were to meet my kids, you'd walk away, feeling blessed for having met them because they're really decent, good kids. And how we've been able to do that is we focused on their strengths. We've redirected them when they wanted to focus on the negative. We've nurtured their gifts and abilities, and we've created an environment in which every single day my kids know that they are loved. Thank you so much.